Welcome back, guys, to the Bear and Scully podcast with me, Sean Scullion, aka Scully, Owen Mallon, aka the Bear, Aidan the Face for Radio behind the scenes, and today we are joined with Dermot O'Kelly. Dermot,
Hello.
welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Thanks for coming up, Dermot.
Cheers, no problem.
You've had a radar jaunt. You're up from Galway. You're not our first Galway man, we were just saying there.
Yeah.
But I appreciate you coming up. But Dermot, before we get started, this is the plug for us. The Patreon is live, guys. The link is below. Make sure you have signed up to our Patreon because you get early access to all of our shows. You get to interact with all of our guests, and you get to follow up with our guests afterwards with questions that we will be accrediting to you, and lots more discounted merch and stuff like that. So make sure you're signed up to the Patreon, and we'll get right back to it. So, Dermot, what we normally like to do from people before we get into the story, and we have read some of your story, and Sean's been talking to you here before, but what we'd like to do is just take everyone back to the very start and get a brief understanding of who's who and how we all got here today.
Well, my name is Dermot O'Kelly. I'm a dad of Eoin, Shona and Dara, and Eoin ended up with something called autoimmune encephalitis last July, which essentially is his immune system turned on his own brain. The disease has only been recognised really since I think 2010 by a doctor in Barcelona called Dr. Joseph Dalmo. There's about 1.25 million chance of getting this, but they actually think that it's more common than that because the symptoms are psychiatric or psychotic, to be honest. So people may have well been suffering from this in the past and they'd end up in a psychiatric hospital for forever and a day kind of thing, you know. So and it came on very, very suddenly within it started off I think it was July the 12th, and he was in his apartment in Limerick, and we got a phone call the next day to say that he told us he hurt his shoulder and said how, and apparently he came out of his bedroom, went up to the living room, hopped up on the couch, fell off the couch, smacked his shoulder off the floor, and then stood up, went ow, and went back to bed. And his flatmates are in the living room, and they reckon that he was sleepwalking because it was essentially a waking dream. And he said that they thought he wasn't making any sense. So I assumed that he was speaking out of context, that he was having a waking dream or something, but it was actually total gibberish that was coming out of his mouth. It was blah, 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 literally. And that was the beginning of...
What age was he when?
23.
Is Owen your oldest?
Yeah.
And had he displayed any things that now in hindsight you've seen before? Or
Nothing. He was actually in Tenerife with us a fortnight beforehand. Absolutely nothing. So
half the ring grand.
Yeah.
And then what happened then? Were you called to come to the apartment from the
No, because he was quite coherent and everything, you know, so we said, get it checked out, obviously. Right. So he ended up going into a walk-in clinic and they gave him paracetamol and told him to go home. And he rang again to say that he's in a lot of pain. So we said go to the A&E. So he went to A&E, got more paracetamol sent home, but they rang him back to come back in to say that they've had someone take a second look at the x-rays and his shoulder is probably dislocated. So that was the Friday. He was operated on I can't remember if it was Friday afternoon or Saturday morning, and was released on the Sunday. So we brought him home, and then for the next week he didn't sleep, maybe 2 hours, I'd say, in 4 nights, and we assumed that it was pain from the shoulder that was keeping him awake. So after that I was actually going over to the British Open, the final day of the British Open that weekend, with my youngest lad and my brother-in-law. And Eileen brought him to the doctor on the Thursday or the Friday night, and the doctor gave him sleeping tablets. And he had a bit of a panic attack that day, but we put it down to sleep deprivation. So I headed off on this Saturday to Dublin. Didn't sleep the Friday night. He didn't sleep the Friday night. So on the Saturday, he took the first sleeping tablet, and then he took a second one an hour later, And then Eileen walked by his room and she could hear him crying. So she opened the door and she says, "What's the matter?" And he says it's just a song that he's listening to that was making him quite emotional. So we went off to the golf, and then we were staying in Liverpool that night, and then I got a text to say that he's after having a seizure. So the seizure went on for, I think, about 15 minutes. Ambulance was obviously called. The paramedic thought it was just a reaction to the sleeping tablets. So when I heard that, it was kind of a relief, because, you know, you kind of jump onto anything that makes sense. So he's brought into hospital anyway. I couldn't get back from Liverpool until midnight of the following night, so I went down. And Eileen let me, she's a nurse in the same hospital, so she let me in through the staff entrance, and I don't remember much after that. But that was the beginning of the gates of hell opening up, basically, for the next, probably the next 4 weeks. So he ended up in...
But see, at this stage, sorry to interrupt you, because just at this stage, you were just, my son's hurt his shoulder and he's just taking a reaction.
Oh, that's all, yeah.
There was no cause to alarm, or was there some?
There was, in hindsight, which he didn't tell us, but he actually rang one of his friends during that week after having the surgery and going into a hospital. He actually rang one of his friends and told her that something weird was happening, that he could read text messages, but he couldn't coordinate his hand to reply, or he couldn't make sense out of what he was trying to do, which is obviously the brain was beginning to get affected at that stage.
But this was only afterwards that you were made aware of this, at the time?
Yeah, and even when he said that he wasn't making any sense when he had the initial, as it turned out to be a seizure, I still didn't put two and two together. I just thought it was he was sleepwalking, or he was having a waking dream, or whatever it was. But when he said that the friends said that he wasn't making any sense, I assumed it was just talking out of context, that he was still forming words, but he wasn't. It was just pure mumbling.
And it seemed like it went from 0 to 100 very quickly. Like, that was only a space of over a week.
Yeah, he had because we've both, or 3 out of the 4 grandparents died with dementia. This was going to acute dementia in 72 hours, from being normal speaking to being spoon-fed. Yeah.
That's mad. In 72 hours to acute dementia.
Yeah.
And it must have been so hard for you to process it. But then when you've obviously now become so aware of the symptoms and all the going-ons and research that now you're seeing them things, and you're seeing these points, and you're thinking about the grandparents and the lineage and things like that. So it's now, but but at the time when this was all going on, like, it's just all happening so quick that you're like, oh well, you're sleepwalking, you talk gibberish, you play this off.
That's it, basically it. Yeah.
So the shock of then arriving back into the hospital and the seizure, what then happened after he had that seizure and you went into the hospital then?
It's a bit of a haze, but the next thing I remember is the infectious disease consultant and registrar saying it looks like viral encephalitis. So encephalitis literally means the swelling of the brain. And you have a brain barrier that stops your immune system from attacking your brain. So every time you get the flu or whatever, your body becomes inflamed, but your brain never does. And there's meant to be a barrier where your immune system can't cross it, but his immune system managed to do that. So they were treating him, filling him with antivirals, antibiotics, and then they did a lumbar puncture to see whether these whatever viral agents were present or not. And then he started having seizures. I hadn't seen a seizure at this stage, and then he started having. I think he had a minor one, lasted in a couple of minutes, and then he had a big one in HDU, and he knew something was coming because he locked eyes with me and then just went dad and fell over, and he had a massive seizure in the bed, and it was so violent. He had already dislocated that shoulder, and the seizure was so violent in the bed, he didn't actually hit off anything. He dislocated the other shoulder and fractured it just from the sheer spasms. So I ended up in hospital with 2 dislocated shoulders. And then that was, I'm probably getting a little bit mixed up here as well, but he also, I remember sending a text to the family group or to my brothers saying that a seizure was something I never wanted to see again. I was calling it a full zombie because I had no other ways of describing it. It's actually called a grand mal seizure. And I thought that was the worst. And then at some stage, I don't know when it was, he basically went, he died in my eyes. I'll go to my grave thinking he'd gone. And the infectious disease consultant and registrar happened to be in talking to us in the HDU, and he keeled over and his lips went blue and the skin went waxy. And I remember Eoin going, Jesus, look at the colour of him. And I sat there, and the consultant and the registrar, HDU nurse, HDU supervisor, and I think there was a nursing assistant there as well. And they all went around the bed and started working on him. I don't know what they were doing, whether they gave him a shot of adrenaline or whatever it was. I'm not actually sure what was going on, but I remember sitting there thinking, I've seen all these interviews of people where they lost their children in car crashes or whatever, and this is they come on shows or they do. I mean, it was ridiculous what I was thinking. It wasn't, I'm thinking, am I going to be one of these people? And they got him back, and then he had what I call absence seizures after that, where there's no response whatsoever. There's nothing. You can wave your hand in front of his eyes and whatever, and there's no blinking. There's nothing like that. And then it went from that stage. He went catatonic. I think over the weekend. At this stage, we'd called. He was brought into ICU, and we brought. My youngest lad stayed with his cousin in Dublin when we came back from the British Open, so we brought him down, basically because the neurology team or the resuscitation team were called or whatever it was, and we called them down to say goodbye because we thought there isn't a hope of him getting out of this. So his sister came in, and he was lying in the bed, and when you see a 23-year-old just staring blankly at you or through you and his mouth hanging open, and we brought Sean in, and he could still understand at that stage, and Eileen says to him, do you know who this is? And he looked at Sean and just went literally like that with the mouth open, which is basically that's what my mother was like for the last 2 weeks of her life. And here, this is where the association with Jesus, this is dementia, virtually, So Sean got very upset at that, obviously. But I'm a bit all over the place.
No,
in the timeline.
And don't be pressuring yourself, because when events like this happen, your own self-protection, because it's, as any father, no matter what age your child is, this is absolutely heartbreaking to go through this, and you're going through trauma too. So don't be pressuring yourself. Relax, because we'll ask you a couple of questions. But what was the age gap with Shauna and
Just 2 years?
So they were close. It was obviously very hard for her, and at the time this was happening, you're an autopilot, and I'm asking you questions you maybe don't even have the answer, and you don't have to give the answer. But at the time when he wasn't, were you aware that he hadn't been diagnosed at this point, had he?
No, they did another lumbar puncture, and the autoimmune encephalitis, I think 40% of it can never be diagnosed. It's just they go by symptoms, but 60% can. And I think there's 11 or 12 antibodies that they can check for through a lumbar puncture. So the test had to go to Oxford, but they were 13 weeks behind. So the neurologist, after the infectious disease team were finished, they had got their viral results back to say it's not viral, so they then handed over to neurology. And we still didn't think it was, we knew it was very serious, obviously, but the neurologist, her name is Dr. Marwa Elliman, basically saved his life. I mean, I can't have any more respect for anybody in my life than that woman. Took absolutely no prisoners, mind you, but
you can deal with that.
Yeah, she said, I'm going to tell you what I know. You're going to tell me if I'm right or wrong. I don't want to hear your story. We don't have time. So she said whatever. We corrected her on a couple of things, and she said, I'm going to do whatever it takes to keep him alive. What he'll be like at the end of it is another matter. So that was like...
So because what I was thinking at the time was, because this was happening so quick, that you were like, oh, there's something's happening here, but hopefully we're hopeful that he's going to come through this, that this is a temporary.
No, this was because I had a brother that died from a brain tumor as well. This is history repeating itself, basically, you know. So
in your mind, you knew that this was a serious, like, and I know it was serious, but what I mean is that to somebody that had never experienced something like this before, you could be thinking this is something one off that we're hoping. But when speaking to the neurologist like this, and her just being that,
when she said that, it was like a sledgehammer, to be honest with you. But I mean, that just, we're probably in a little bit of denial up to that point, even though we're recognising a lot of similarities with what happened before. But
what about your wife?
She's amazing. She's a nurse in the same hospital, and herself and Shona, my daughter, were absolute two rocks. Shona ended up becoming nearly an expert in the disease because she just started researching immediately, you know. And Eoin is very much, when she's in the zone, she's very objective. Whereas I was all over the place. I didn't know what, I just felt helpless. But she was very much in, they have to do what they have to do kind of thing. You know, it's crazy because we didn't actually speak that much over the 2 or 3 weeks because there was somebody with them 24 hours a day. So we're
ships in the night.
Yeah, well, not so much. Even you just don't have the energy. Yeah. So we were sleeping on chairs outside in the corridor when they eventually kicked us out of HDU because we'd no right to be in there, to be honest with you. But it's very hard when someone tells you can't be near your child when, you know, the chips are down, you know. So she's been always, she kind of took charge of them. Like, I mean, she was explaining to me what the drugs were, what they were for, why they were dosing them with massive amounts. He got to the stage where they couldn't give him any anti-inflammatories because that would, I can't remember why, but the only painkillers he was on with 2 dislocated shoulders was paracetamol. They couldn't give him anything else for fear of setting off more seizures, which was going to lead to more possible brain damage. But the neurologist herself rang the lab in Oxford twice, and her registrar rang twice to try and get the results back because her hands were tied in so much she couldn't hit him with the big armory of drugs that she wanted to until she got the results back. But she did say that even if the results came back negative, the chances are, in her opinion, was that he had this autoimmune encephalitis. So he ended up getting his blood scrubbed 5 days in a row. So that's literally what they did was they took his blood out, replaced the plasma with artificial plasma and put it back into him, because the plasma was full of the antibodies that were attacking the brain. So the idea was that they dilute down the antibodies, and they put him on IVIG, which they don't. It's in immunoglobulin, and that again, I think, they don't actually know why it works or if it works or why, if it works, it does work, but they gave him that for 5 days as well and put him on steroids. The steroids was to reduce the inflammation in the brain, which didn't show up in an MRI. Strangely enough, the MRI was, according to the radiologist, was clear. Our neurologist disagreed with the radiologist, which is pretty unheard of for one consultant to override another one. But she said everything is pointing towards this thing. So he was when he was the psychosis was beginning to kick in. So he's an artist, qualified, or what's the word? Graduated as an artist in November. It was actually his first social occasion since all this happened. But we tried to give him a sketch pad, and it was like drawing cobwebs or something. There was no coherent pattern to be, he then, when I'm not sure did he actually pull the catheters out of his neck or not, but he was getting violent as well. So it took 4 nurses to keep him in the ward, even with 2 broken shoulders. He took a couple of swings at Eoin, which we were actually impressed that he was able to do, again with 2 broken shoulder or 2 dislocated shoulders. Was kicking out at staff, not like there's no history of any kind of he's not violent by any stretch of the imagination. He's a very relaxed, determined young man. But he was getting, the panic attacks were getting worse and worse. The anxiety was off the charts. And then he would have these episodes, particularly bad at nighttime as well. So I think his heart rate went up to 196, which was like, we're just sitting there watching the machines, and then they couldn't give him any more sedation at that stage because he was maxed out. But it was like something, I don't know, unimaginable, to be honest with you. So he ended up going into ICU, and ICU was probably the place where we got a break ourselves from it, because we knew he was getting 1-to-1 attention. When he was in HDU and he was still in the first days of being diagnosed, the neurologist came in and asked the nursing staff, did he sleep last night? And she said, whoever the staff nurse was, said, yes, he did, yeah. Did you notice anything? No, didn't notice anything. And I just turned and says, what makes you think he was asleep? And she says, oh, because I was looking in him. And I said, I was sitting beside him all night. I says, he hadn't slept a wink. So I said, he might have his eyes closed, but he's not asleep. So we reckon in the space of about 18 days, he had less than 10 hours sleep. And 3 of that was coming out from surgery for the second shoulder as well. So when he went catatonic, that was... he had 2 or 3 episodes of that. So that's when your body goes into weird angular shape, and you can hold your hand, or you can get his hand there, and you can put his arm up there, and it'll stay there. There's no motor control, and the only thing that will bring his arm down slowly is just sheer muscle fatigue, but it's not a conscious decision. So he had gone through, he had the full zombie seizures, the absent seizures, and the catatonia as well. And then after the anxiety, the psychosis set in, and that was tough. Just going back to the neurologist asking the nursing staff, she also asked them, did they observe anything? And said no. And my wife and daughter said, well, actually, my daughter said he has a tremor in his leg. And then Eoin says, well, actually, yeah, I noticed that he goes like this with his mouth as if he's chewing on a tiny piece of food. And she says, that's actually indicative of the thing that we suspect. So she said, that's highly significant. Even just something as tiny as that, I didn't notice it, to be honest with you, but Eoin did. And so he started, the start of the plasma scrubbing, the start of the steroids that gave it him for 24 hours because he was just reacting badly. And after that, then we had to video him when he was having seizures, because the neurology team wanted to see what type of seizures there were, because apparently they can tell where the overload on the brain is depending on the movements. And then he started it was the double matinee of Oppenheimer and Barbie was out, and he got it into his head that he was auditioning for a part in Barbie, so he was singing "I'm a Barbie Girl" for hours in the middle of the HDU, and then that got worse, and then he was just doing this high-pitched scream constantly. And while he was singing the Barbie, I mean, it sounds funny, but when I was videoing him, and I have a video on the phone, you can actually tell he's petrified. You can tell by his eyes, he's absolutely petrified. And then because he wasn't able to speak at the time or make any sense, it was a couple of weeks later when the psychiatric team was saying they managed to eke it out of him that he said it's like living in two worlds. So when he closes his eyes, he's got a perfectly clear world around him, and when he opens it, he's got two, but he doesn't know which is which. And he was fully aware that this was a form of insanity. So he's aware that he was psychotic while being psychotic, which I still struggle to get my head around. I mean, I always thought if you're psychotic or you're at in that much distress that you're not aware of anything else. But he did have a very logical point of view on it, but that was terrifying, to be honest with you. So he spent, I think, 16 days in total between ICU and HDU. He was brought onto another ward, put back into HDU again, because he was violent. He was only violent for one night that I can remember, and after that he was taking it out on the walls, or like he'd go up to a wall and start banging the wall with his fists. So he had a security guard on his door for 17 days and nights, and he managed to get out of the room one night and try to get out the third floor window of the hospital, and we don't know whether that was a suicide bid or trying to escape. We imagine actually it was probably more trying to escape, to be honest with you. But we were at home, and Eileen was going, do we go in or what do we do? And I'm nearly at the stage, what's the worst that can happen? That if he escapes, they can section him or they can do something, because we just didn't have the wherewithal to understand where he was or what to do. Or, I mean, as I said, the feeling of powerlessness was just absolutely horrendous to deal with, So he was brought back from HDU out onto general ward or into a room, because at least there he could start getting physio for the shoulders, etc. But I mean, he wouldn't let anyone go near him for ages. I remember one night someone was trying to take bloods, and it took 11 minutes, and he absolutely let fly. She couldn't find a vein, so I was waiting for the explosion, and it did happen. And he rang. Another part of the disease is that there's no linear improvement in it. So you could have one decent day and you think, he's turned the corner, whatever it was, and you go back in the next day and all hell is broken loose again. And I'm a bit jumbled up.
No.
But even during all that, you're saying there that you thought you were turning a corner or whatever. But was there points that he would be back as in himself?
Yeah, he was quite coherent after. We say we'd a bad week where he couldn't feed himself. Well, that was only a couple of days. And when the neurologist or when the infectious disease team were in, he made it clear that he wanted to be part of the conversation. So it's not like he was completely gone or absent or whatever you want to describe it. He knew this was part of the scary thing. He knew what was going on, but just couldn't do anything about it. Couldn't articulate. Couldn't speak at times. So, he'd try and put on a show, and instead of, he said to me, "What's alive?" one of the days, and I was trying, "What's alive?" And I said, "What do you mean by what's alive?" He said, "What's alive?" And it actually meant he's going, what's happening? Do you know, so this is going back to my dementia thing. There is a connection between what he was trying to say and what actually came out of his mouth, but it took a lot of understanding, and then he'd get frustrated, and then the anxiety would kick in again, and then the panic attacks would kick in again, and then you're worried, is the seizure going to kick in again? And at that stage,
had his seizures started to ease for?
They put him on. He was on 4 anti-seizure meds. He was on antipsychotic med, anti-medication, and I can't remember. They discovered he'd probably osteoporosis as well in the middle of all this, because they couldn't figure out how come the bones fractured that easily. So they did test for that, and they said his parathyroid, which apparently dictates how much vitamin D you can absorb, wasn't working. So his vitamin D levels are all like completely floored. So they thought he was going to have to give him these injections for the rest of his life into his stomach for the vitamin D. But that's actually come back. So they don't know how or why.
That's bound to have been a fear factor then too, that he's got a vitamin D deficiency, and he's the potential to have these violent seizures, so that what could have continued to do to he broke something.
Yeah, it turns out that the neurologist asked for another MRI to be done, and she asked them to go even deeper. And it turns out he has a lesion deep in his brain. So when your brain is formed, as it's being formed, the grey matter migrates out like a cauliflower, essentially. And this is a little piece of grey matter that didn't make its way to the surface. So it's not any danger to him apart from making him a little bit more prone to seizures. So that's just something to watch out for. But it never reared its head up until last July, But the seizures were as a direct result of the brain being inflamed. It wasn't as from this thing.
And was the plasma scrubbing and these starting to work? Were they starting to restrict?
Yeah. Well, when you say work, you see, it's like when your brain will inflame quite quickly, and it takes a long time for it to come back down again. So they seemed to be working, and then if we fast forward 6-7 weeks, we actually got him home, which was a battle and a half, because even the drive home on the motorway, the cars going by were freaking him. Light and sound in the hospital was freaking him. So the door had to be closed to the corridor, because you hear trolleys and plates and whatever going on outside. But we got him home, and he tried to make a cup of coffee. So he put cold water in the kettle, turned the kettle on, put 4 spoons of sugar in the mug, 4 spoons of coffee in the mug, turned the kettle off, made the coffee, and tried to drink it with the cold water. That was on a Friday. By the following Thursday, he was asking us what did we want for breakfast, and he was making toast with honey, and again, massive improvement in the 6 days. And then that afternoon he had another massive seizure and back in again. So we're back to square one. But at that stage, the neurologist said we're going to have to go to the second line treatment, which is a drug called rituximab, which is used in oncology. And rituximab essentially shuts down your immune system. So it's just ruling out the possibility that the immune system can continue to attack his brain. And then we're told that your brain shares a lot of the same antibodies and proteins as you do in cancer tumors. So there was a possibility of, I think they call it a teratoma, which is the beginning of a cancer. And they had to check him out for that to see whether that was triggering the immune system to attack the brain. But thankfully he didn't. But yeah, it is pretty... I've jumped way ahead there.
No, you're fine. But even just as you're telling that story, Dermot, there's a movie that springs to mind that I watched a couple of months back, and I can't mind what it was. I think it was called Brain on Fire.
Yeah,
if I'm right.
New York journalist. Yeah.
Aye, and not that they're the same, but are they similar?
It's the same disease.
It is
the same disease, but what you see on Netflix is sanitized completely. Mm-hmm. There's another thing. Hannibal is another TV series on Netflix. He ends up with this autoimmune thing as well, but we stopped watching it because
it wasn't a portrayal of real.
Yeah. The worst part about it was the psychosis. It was just to see someone suffering like that, I can remember sitting in with him one night in the HDU, and he was 15 days, I think, without proper sleep at this stage. And he was just gone. He was screaming. He was crying. He'd have moments of lucidity. He'd be back again. And I just looked at him and going, thinking, how much more can you take? And at that was the only time that I was ready to let him go. He was... I couldn't... Sorry.
You're right. And take your time, because that's a very brave, honest statement to make, because we've had a lot of parents here that there's times they just don't want them suffering anymore.
Yeah.
And they can't watch it. It's unbearable. And it's very hard to admit that, because you think you're not, but you do anything in the world to stop them suffer. And then you have these waves. But I think anyone listening to this...
It was selfish as well from me, because I didn't know, to be honest with you, I didn't know how much more I could take either. It was just, I mean, it was so fast. Yeah, your mind goes back to 2 weeks previous, 3 weeks previously, and he's on top of the world, and this, I was trying to, there was no logic to it either, so there's no linear improvement, so it goes up and down and rises a little bit and then drops, and then we couldn't see a way out, to be honest. It just, yeah, it was...
It does sound absolutely chaotic because, as you say, like, from making your breakfast to this and you're back, and I know that there's not linear improvement, but sometimes when you see that and you get your son back for that period of time,
yeah,
you're thinking, you know what, like, maybe, and then it's happening again, and like,
I can remember one night in HDU that they gave him 3 doses of sedation in the space of an hour, around 8 o'clock, and by 8:30 he was back. Like, it wasn't that he's improved, it was our own was back within the half hour. And then Sean and my daughter was saying, well, if that's the case, that he can be back to himself within that short space of time, it means that physically the brain is still intact in there, so we went literally crying with him at 8 o'clock, and at 9 o'clock I went home, or 9:20 I went home, and I remember smiling at him, going, this is amazing. Like, I mean, we're making massive strides here, and the next morning it was just absolute mayhem again,
That's it. It's got to be a torture in itself, given that hope, snapping it away, given that, like...
We stopped actually thinking, we just took one day at a time, because we couldn't cope with this roller coaster. It was...
It is a hell.
Yeah.
Because it's almost teasing in that, like, and you don't know from day to day what you're going to find when you're going back there. And it's so quick. Like, the time scale we're talking is weeks from you were being on holidays, and he was obviously living away, and like it's all happened. So like
it got much worse in the hospital. So we're trying to explain to someone before that. I mean, if you have, because there's no path for this, and they couldn't tell us what to expect. That was the worst. If someone has cancer, and whether the prognosis is going to be good or bad, there's stages to it, and you know what to expect. And we even had the experience with my brother with his brain tumour, and Eileen's sister died a few short years ago just from fungal infection in her sinuses. Just something as innocuous as that. Like, you and I are breathing in the same spores as we speak, and it just... We've had our fair share of... We've had our fair share of bad luck, so I thought there wasn't much that life could throw at me anymore, and then this came out. So because there was no pathway, we just didn't know. I can remember sitting in the car park. Eileen would stay with them at night time, and I'd go in at 8, And I can remember putting my head on the steering wheel, just bawling my eyes out. And it was out of fear of what lies ahead. And I was afraid to be on my own with them. I was afraid to make eye contact with them in case that would kick something off. I mean, and something like, he couldn't turn on the shower. He didn't know how to turn on the shower in the bathroom to have a shower, obviously. And that set off another episode. Brushing his teeth set off an episode. It was. I have to say the security staff. They were from all over the world. They were unbelievable. They really were. I remember one guy. The first night that the security was put in his room, I remember saying to him, "Will you look after my son?" He says, "I'll treat him like my own," which was magic, you know. So there was crazy things happening. I mean, he was. I was trying to find the funny things as well. When he had the second operation on the other shoulder, they did a nerve block to stop the pain, and his arm wasn't working. And I was trying to explain to him that he had a nerve block, but that wasn't sinking in at all. So I said, they've just taken the energy out of your arm for a little while. And he goes, charge it. He just holds up the arm and charge it, you know. And I'm going, oh, yeah, there's still a bit of a
humour in there.
Yeah.
See, just you're saying that there was no pathway, like as you say there, cancer, this is the path we go on. Was there no path because it was so hard to give a diagnosis on? Or did they know what it was, but they just had to go through all these procedures to try and find out?
Yeah, they got the results back from Oxford after 13 days, and then she absolutely let loose with the canon of medications. I mean, she was saying that she can't give him any more. He's on more than the max, as she said, but at least it gave her another method of treating this thing, you know. So she actually, you were saying earlier on about did the first treatments work, and they actually worked quite well, so much so that she decided that the second line of treatment wasn't necessary, and that's when he was sent home eventually, and then we went back in again, and then the second line of treatment started. So he's on, at the moment, he's got no immune system. Still living life to the full, mind you. She said that she's never seen such an acute onset of symptoms and never saw such an acute recovery either.
But I'm getting why you have admiration, because this is a very rare disease, and it could have been very, very easily missed, because the neurologist had an idea that this was the disease.
Yeah.
But the MRIs and the other things were, if that wasn't an our case and someone wasn't as convinced, they would have got that back and says, well, no, well, we'll rule that out, that's not that.
Yeah.
So the fact that she had that conviction and what it was, which is...
She's one of 4 neurologists on the island that has experience of this. She was a lecturer in the University of Brighton as well. So she actually had experience of this before. And as soon as she saw his chart, she was going, yeah, this has got all the hallmarks of it. And I said, well, what's in store? She says, I don't know. She says, your guess is as good as mine. Every single case is completely different. So the previous person in Ireland, or definitely in Galway that got it, was a couple of years ago, spent 8.5 months in hospital and 9 weeks in an induced coma and still hasn't gone back to work. So we're very, very grateful to have him where he is now. He's done far better than expected.
See, just as you're saying there, you know, he's on recovery, but what does recovery look like?
Recovery, he's still on 3 anti-seizure meds a day. He's still on vitamin D tablets, and he's got no immune system. So what the rituximab does, your immune system has got T cells and B cells. The T cells do the fighting, the B cells target the enemy. So he has no B cells. So this wave of measles coming across Europe now is a bit of a concern. We're not sure if there's residual memory in the T cells or not, which means that we say the cold virus and the flu virus, which he would have had in the past, obviously there might be some kind of residual memory there. the danger one for me is COVID because it's so new. But try and tell a 24-year-old you're not going to your friend. He's only after, as I said, he's only after come back from Barcelona for 4 days in a music festival, and we warned him to be cautious, but I don't know.
I know. How do you tell a young lad not to live their life?
But also, when you've went through that, you know, there is a pathway in your life. How are you to live the rest of your life in the fear, or you know, you don't know what's in store for you when something like that, and you're close, and you'd seen them at a point where you thought they might not come through this. So sometimes you wonder, you know, as a parent, you're worried, so you're just worrying for them. But as a young lad like that, and they meet that, sometimes you're like, you need to be careful. But then other times you
have to
need to live
life
this to the full, because you know you've been through this.
Yeah.
But you know, just before we come here, when obviously you're in the real midst of it, and he's in the psychosis, and his sister and your wife's, was there any communities online that they could reach out to? Because I know it's so rare here. It's rare anywhere in the world. But the beauty of, I know a lot of people don't like social media and stuff like that, but the beauty of what we find with a lot of people is that reaching out to somebody that's experienced something similar is some level of reassurance, because
they're going through the same thing. Yeah, I came across a group on Facebook called International Autoimmune Encephalitis Survivors Group. And that, to be honest with you, there was no solace there. Because they were very matter of fact. They were very detailed in their, like, I mean, they had probably more knowledge than most neurologists did. And it wasn't a particularly optimistic place to be, because you'd go in and say, my son is currently violent, my son is psychotic. What do we do? Well, my daughter was this, blah, 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 and she ended up being in hospital for 2 years or whatever it was. And I'm going, Jesus, what's in store for us? Or someone else, you read the other stories, 7 years after catching this or this disease kicking in, they finally lost their battle. So it's if anything, it was more doom and gloom. Yeah, there wasn't. But there was sections of it that I needed to read. I needed to. Again, we're trying to find a pathway through this, but
it's a pity that they couldn't create a community for people that have just come into this, where people could guide them and say, "Look, listen, we're not here to tell. We're here to make you more," because there is practical things that people could tell you. You know, practical sides of illnesses that you know, and even the emotional support of, and you know what we did, we done this, and we swapped and rotated, and this helped, you know. And I know that sounds stupid to most, but like,
well, the neurologist actually gave us the best piece of advice, and she says, start reading medical journals. Do not go onto these sites, because people will only go onto the sites when they're looking for answers to a current problem, whereas the ones that have got through it all are now dealing with the aftermath, and they're hopefully on a better path, so they're
staying away from that.
Yeah. So she just told us, don't read it, which was, you know, it was great bit of advice in the end. But the worry, I was watching webinars by that Dr. Joseph Dalmo, and
this is the Spanish doctor that first
diagnosed or came up with this thing, and we stopped doing that, because then he started throwing out facts and figures which weren't particularly fabulous. So that there's, like, for instance, there's a 10% fatality rate within the first 5 years, or there's a 35% relapse rate. And when you're dealing with this, you don't want to read. I know it's 1 chance in 10, but you don't believe that you've 9 chances in 10 of it not happening, you know.
It's almost like trying to nitpick the information that's valuable to you and close off the what's not. But, you know, the toll on your family in the midst of that, it must have been really hard, you know, because you, as you say, like, if you're in during the day and your wife's the practicalities of everything that's going around, and you're not talking, you're handling it different. How did you? You know, how did you get a chance to talk and through that? Because I know a lot of families we talk to that have had sick children and or relatives that they're caring, that they find it's very lonely because you're there on your own and your wife's there, and if you're not there, you're away to work, or it's a very lonely.
We actually didn't work. I've only gone back to work 7 weeks ago, and Eileen went back to work in October. So everything has been directed towards them. Absolutely everything. We have great neighbours, which are unbelievable. I mean, as regards ferrying the kids in and out from the first time, when we thought he was going to kick the bucket.
And was there a time in that was a very realistic?
Oh yeah, the Wednesday, 27th of July. Yeah, that was when the call went out.
You had your children down to see him because you didn't think, you thought that was...
Say goodbye, yeah. Eileen rang her sister in Dublin, and her husband left work immediately and tore down with our youngest lad, because we thought it was a matter of hours at that stage.
And what age is your other children?
Sean is 22 now and Dara's 15. So there's a few residual effects there with Dara as well, a little bit. I think he's certainly not the happy-go-lucky young fella that he was 12 months ago. I don't think he's coming back to himself, but it did obviously take a massive toll on him, and he wouldn't go in to see him. He just couldn't handle it. So he didn't see Eoin for 6 weeks, I think, and then went in. And whenever I get home in the evening, or we'd always make it sure that we'd include him in what happened. So we'd say, not a great day today, Dara. And we had them prepared as much as we could, or him in particular, in case the worst happened, It'd
have been hard for a young lad to see your big brother, your big brother who you look up till, it'd have been hard probably till... You're probably scared to replace the image of your big brother, when they're ill, and seeing them like that.
Yeah.
There's a big fear in that.
Yeah. Or just seeing someone that's, like Eoin was he's very determined, but still quite laid back. Well, that's what I always thought, but he actually turned out that he said his teenage years are full of anxiety. I said, Christ, you hid that very well. I couldn't believe it when he said that. But, from seeing that, like someone that's laid back to someone that's off the charts, banging off walls, trying to get out windows, trying to escape out of the hospital, it must horror stories for a young fella,
Something I found very hard in that is, and it was one time I was watching a show, and the question was, is it worse to be insane or to know you're going insane? And the torture of being locked in there where he was between that two worlds, it must have been a very torturous as a parent for you, because I know this sounds and it's a weird way to, but if he was absent and you knew he was absent, would it have been a wee bit easier? But to know that he wasn't actually. And obviously he's troubled, but what I mean is he knows that something's not right at this point, and that must have been very hard for you, because you know that he's scared. He knows that this isn't right.
Yeah, it was the look in his eyes that this was before he was able to articulate that he's living in two worlds, but the look in his eyes while he was screaming, or while he was singing, or while he was doing anything, was just, it was pure fear. It wasn't that he was away in whatever imaginary place, for want of a better word. He was very aware of what was happening to him. He's no memory of the hospital now, so he's no memory of July, August until late September, apart from going for walks outside the hospital.
But he was on a massive amount of medication too, wasn't he? Then?
I think it's also the fact that
to protect himself.
Yeah, I think the brain just and it seems to be quite common in autoimmune encephalitis survivors that they can't remember anything in the hospital, which is probably some kind of self-protection mechanism, I would think.
Well, then coming through that, then in and then he had the relapse. You were home, and he had I don't know relapse, but he had another seizure, and he's back because, as you said, it's not a linear thing. What then? Did you start to have more often good days, or what was?
It went from him being no sleep to high anxiety to psychosis to high anxiety to low anxiety to eventually back to level playing field. That happened over. We said that the high anxiety to psychosis to high anxiety happened within days. The psychosis lasted about a week, maybe. Oh no, it was going on a bit longer. He was hallucinating, auditory and visual hallucinations. So when he was in college, for example, he was working at McDonald's part-time. And I remember he got out of the bed and went round to my side of his bed, and I said, "Where are you going?" He said, "I'm going to clock out from work." And I said, "What do you mean you're clocking out from work? This machine is there. I'm going to clock out from work." And I said, you don't realise there's no machine there. He said, "I know that, yeah, but I need to clock out from work." So I just stood back and let him, and he did whatever into midair. Went back into bed again. So he was he thought he was a character in a video game as well. That was another. And the only thing that would keep him relatively quiet, as opposed, I wouldn't say calm, but relatively quiet, was this song called Raven, which just was on a constant loop on his headphones. And even the headphones broke. So that was panic because he was freaking because he'd no way of calming down. So then that was run down through Galway to try and find a place anywhere that just give us headphones, and we bought the headphones. Connection didn't work. Back down again. And it was just little things like this that you're literally freaking, and then you'd end up running from the hospital to the shop because it was quicker than getting into a car trying to find a parking space, going into the shop, come back out, and then find another parking space. So everything was done. Everything was just heightened.
You're nervous. You were on eggshells for it.
Yeah, I mean, like brushing your teeth. I mean, it's such a small, normal thing to do, and that was, he couldn't get the toothpaste out of the tube. Then the security have to follow him everywhere. So he said, "I want to go out, or I want to walk." So we brought him out into the corridor outside the room, and then he said, "I need to go to the toilet." So I had to stand outside the toilet, and then things had gone quiet in the toilet. So I went in after a couple of minutes, and he's there standing in his pajamas underneath the shower. And I says, "Eoin," and he says, "What's happening? What am I doing? What's happening?" So he again, you're going back to the dementia relationship between what he was going through and the symptoms of it, you know. God, I'm trying to think of other things now. There was I can remember one of the days we were going for, and because COVID was present in the hospital, everyone had masks on. So I brought him out for a walk, and even the walks were done at 100 miles an hour. There was no strolling. Everything had to be done immediately. And we were walking up through the corridor, and this man came down, and he says, "Hello." And I'm going, "Hello, how are you?" And he says, I think his name was Rob. And I says, "I'm sorry." I says, "I haven't got you at all." He says, "I'm the infectious disease registrar." So he was one of the guys that was working on him. And Eoin at this stage had been told that he can go home the following Monday. And your man Rob said, he's to Eoin, he says, "You know, you're the talk of the hospital. You're the talk of the consultant's room, that someone is getting out of hospital so fast." And I'm going, like, we're here 6.5 weeks. That's not fast. But it is actually in AE terms, you know. So that was just, yeah, you kind of grab onto every little thing to, you know, you turned on and didn't remember this half an hour later, and I was trying to just repeat things as you are on the mend. I did tell him in, I think it was HDU when he was lucid one night, he says, "What's going to happen?" No, I said, "I don't know." He said, "Will you tell me?" And I said, "Yeah." So I said, "If it comes to the worst, I'll tell you." Yeah. So I never liked him. I I didn't try and wrap it up in cotton wool. I told him things were very serious. And that was, he'd weep at that stage.
Was there a temptation or is this a conversation you and your wife had that you were going to be, was there a temptation to say to him it'd be all right? Because sometimes that's,
no,
as a parent you want to reassure, but at the same time you don't want to.
Not for me, no. Because my brother that died, he never told us he was terminally ill. So literally I went into the hospital and he was having a seizure. I didn't actually see the seizure. I saw the aftermath of it. And he was gone at that stage. So 2 days later, we gave permission to turn his life support off. And I'm not going to hide it from anybody. It's not fair on... I'm not saying about what my brother did was wrong, but I knew that he was trying to protect us, but that didn't help.
Yeah.
You know, so
you have been through the mill before this all, and an experience in that. You know, and the fact that it's not the same, but there's linkages between the seizures and it's in the brain and
I have it in the WhatsApp group with my brothers. I said, here we go again, meaning it's the same as Dave.
And was that your fear that the same would happen to Owen as happened to Dave, that you would take one of these seizures and you should lose him?
Basically, yeah. Or even worse was that he'd be permanently brain damaged. And that wasn't, I didn't want that. That's, as I said to you, let him go. If that's it, because I can remember saying to my dad after, when my brother was in hospital, that my dad was asking me, is there any hope for him? And I said, look, if he survives, he's going to be a vegetable, and he doesn't want that. So when the nurse said that she needed permission to turn off his life support, I didn't hesitate. I've slept very easy with that decision over the years, and I wouldn't want Owen to be in that vegetative state either. Just, he wouldn't either, you know. So, but yeah, he's it's hard to describe. It's hard to describe the dealing with the psychosis and dealing with a sane person at the same time is just ridiculous. We're being asked a lot. Then they did a gag test on him one night in HDU because things were going very downhill very fast. And there's no pussyfooting around when things happen, because I'm a fairly diplomatic type of person, but I remember the emergency consultant that was on duty, and he said he did the gag reflex and his irises are still responding. He says we're not into intubation yet, and who's going to make that call? And he said, I will. And I said, well, the trouble is it took you an hour and 15 minutes to get from ICU to here, which is just adjoining rooms. I said, so in the meantime, and obviously he has to deal with other emergencies. In the meantime, can we not just, because the nursing staff couldn't give him any medication unless they got the okay from the consultant, and if the consultant is dealing with another emergency, that means Owen is going nuts, going crazy, or hyperventilating, or whatever psychosis is. And I was going, like, can you not just say, if heart rate goes over 190, give him medication to bring him down? Or if it's over 170, can we get someone who's trained into talking people down? Because the HDU staff are amazing as regards, they knew exactly what to do, how to deal with someone who is like at that level.
Can I ask you, what is the, and I know what ICU is, but what's the difference in
HDU is 2 patients for 1 nurse. ICU is 1 patient for 1 nurse.
Okay.
So ICU was full as well because COVID was in, so he ended up in HDU. There was an Indian nurse, male nurse in ICU, and we went in because initially you're kind of going, Jesus, someone is ICU, you're going to be he's in a serious position. So we went in the next day and we're talking to the male nurse, and I said, how is he? And he says, yeah, times he's lucid, at times he's all over the place. So he said, I'm just after bringing him for a walk. And I'm going, so what do you mean? And he said, he has to go for a walk. I said, what you do? I brought him for a walk. So, and I'm going, I like that. There's none of this God help you kind of thing. There's, if the man wants to go for a walk, he wants to go for a walk, and he did. So there was a nurse as well in the HTU that was Amy was her name, I think, and she was unbelievable, absolutely unbelievable. We had problems then with we were actually asked by a ward manager to mind Eoin between the hours of 8 in the morning and 8 in the evening, and when that was said to me, I was actually taken back, and I went in, sat beside Eoin for an hour, and I texted Eoin and I says, am I being totally out of order here? Is that where the hell is this after coming out of? And Eoin says, get that woman back and ask it for it to be recorded in the medical records.
Aye, that's what I want to ask you. So somebody had asked you
to mind Eoin,
to basically do their job and to mind him.
So apparently they couldn't get a nursing assistant or security. So this is when I was saying to Eileen, I said there'd be no harm if he escaped, because they'd have to actually step up to the plate. So
because this you're not medically trained to handle a patient like this. So this isn't about a situation. You're going to be there. You've been there.
Yeah.
It's not about, just for people listening, this isn't about I'm not willing. It's the fact that you're not trained or professionally capable of doing what they're asking you to do.
Yeah.
They're shaping off the responsibility.
That's basically it. Yeah. So Eileen said, get that woman back, and say that in no way are we accepting any kind of a deal like that, and that we're not trained. We're not.
Ask her to put her name to it on a sheet.
Which she never did, and she told me to be diplomatic, so I wasn't. But the following day there was a security staff outside the door, and if you remember, I said all the noise was affecting Eoin badly, and he could hear music, and I thought he was nuts, like, again, round the completely imagine it. And then the intercom at the door for the nurse, you could just hear very, very faintly. If you put your ear right up to it, you could hear the music, and Eoin was able to hear this from the bed above the din from outside. But she opened the door the next day, and your security guard needs line of sight to be able to do his job properly. And I said, something, you had no problem asking me to do it. So there was times where the care was not what was required, and I would say that I can remember putting up a Facebook post saying 10% of that staff should be sacked, and the other 90% get the 10% wages as a bonus. That's what it was like. But I'm just after remembering something as well. When he was coming about week 5, they tested him 3 times for COVID, and he was after catching something, bearing in mind now that his immune system was banjaxed, and he had caught something, and he was... The staff are telling us that week on week there is progression. Day to day you can't see it, but week to week there was progression, and he started deteriorating on the Tuesday, in my opinion. The neurology team said, no, he's still fine. I says, you're not here every day. So he was getting worse and worse and regressing. And then on the Sunday, the nurse hadn't been in to give him his afternoon meds. So I said to the security guy on the door, I said, if you see a nurse passing, would you ask the nurse to come in, just as there's no panic? And I closed the door, and Eoin said, panic. And I says, what do you mean? He says, need the nurse now. And I'm going, so what are you talking about? He said, need the nurse now. And bear in mind that I watched him. He knew something was happening to him in the ICU that time when he keeled over. And he says, the end. And I said, what do you mean the end? The end. And I'm going, what do you mean the end? He says, death. And I'm going, Jesus Christ, don't you stop. Like, you're getting better, you're getting better. And about a minute later, he started into this absolute fit that it wasn't like the other seizures. It was, there's more fluidity to it. It's not as erratic. And he just started this complete seizure thing again. So I was shouting at the security guard. He came bursting in, hit the alarm bells. The nurses came flying in. And there was one nurse that somehow got through to him, and he just started throwing up everywhere. And they brought him into the ensuite and cleaned him up, and he was still gasping for breath at that stage. And about 10 minutes later, they got him changed. 15 minutes later, they got him changed back into bed again. And I was absolutely in shock because he was the one that was shouted death to me before this actual fit took place. And I couldn't take any more. And I remember he wouldn't let them touch him to take bloods, or they wouldn't let him examine him. And I just said to the security guard, will you just come and stand? He wouldn't let the security guard into the room. I said, will you just, like, the door is open here, just stand at the door where you can't see you, just keep an eye. I just have to get out. So I went out for a cup of coffee, went across the road to the shop, and I came back, and it was like someone switched on a light bulb in his head. The difference between the young man I left 25 minutes previously and the young man I came back to was like chalk and cheese. I mean, the level of alertness was higher than anything else that we had seen in 5 weeks. And I had texted Eoin saying I can't stay in the room anymore. I said, I'm just stepping out for a minute. And she says, what happened? And I was telling her what happened. And I came back, and I said, within 5 minutes of going into that room again, I text her and I says, there's something wonderfully crazy after happening. And she goes, what? And I says, literally, I said, someone's after turning on a light bulb. And we think, I don't know what happened, but I think that last fit blew the cobwebs off, or did something, or just reignited something in the brain. So that was the beginning, really, of the road to recovery, that one, yeah. But that was probably, there was 3 times the sledgehammer of the neurologist saying she'll do everything she can, but can't promise what he'll be like, and then watching him being worked on, and then that moment were the 3 big moments, I think, in the whatever 2 months that we had, yeah. But it was yeah, it certainly made us appreciate life a hell of a lot more,
It's absolutely traumatic for you that and like you're going through that, and it's a like you're going through that and going back, like even that going away for having come back, like even though that you come back and he's changed, like
it wasn't like he was sitting up having a chat or anything. It was just the demeanor was better. It was an unbelievable transformation, whatever happened. Again, it's light bulb and blowing cobwebs away. That's probably the easiest way to describe it. It was just.
And then, as you were going back, then over the next couple of weeks, was there
very slow improvement? But we noticed that when he'd fall back, it wouldn't go back
as far,
just quite as far, and it would also improve very, very slightly. So again, that spirally constant improving was beginning to kick in. So you could actually, instead of going, we say fortnight by fortnight, we're now every 2 days we could see, he's a little bit better, he's a little bit more with it, or whatever it was. He was, again, the anxiety was tough.
What was it like then when he had got better and they said to you that they were going to let him go home? Was there a fear in that? Because the last time he come home,
the second time,
yeah,
no, because the neurologist said even if he seizes now, he says he's obviously doing a hell of a lot better at home than he is in the hospital.
Yeah.
So even if he seizes now, as long as it doesn't, I think, I can't remember if she said 4 minutes, as long as it doesn't go over that, just deal with it basically and give her a ring. When he came home the first time and had that big seizure on the Thursday, we're meant to video it and time it, but you haven't and there's a drug called midazolam which is in a syringe, and you inject it into the side of the mouth when someone is seizing, and it brings them. It's a hyper relaxant. So like, we weren't there with the stopwatch waiting for 4 minutes before we administered this thing. Like, it was just get that thing, get it into him now, and then we just brought him in. So she was saying anyway, regardless if he has a seizure or not, that in her opinion he's better off at home at this stage. So we kind of lent ourselves to the fact that he might have seizures for the rest of his life. So be it. There's plenty of people with epilepsy and the like around that have very good quality of life. But he hasn't had a seizure now since that day. So, and his meds are being tapered off. So the rituximab is obviously, we don't actually know if it's working. Not the only way of knowing if it's working is when they stop it and allow his immune system to recover. And if he'll always have to be watched and whatever, So
what is day-to-day life now like?
It's brilliant. As I said, he's came back from Barcelona. He's living a full life. We set up a little bit of a studio for him at home. He's just back with his friends again. He has a very close group of friends, and number one, they weren't allowed in to see him anyway, but he missed them. He missed the actual camaraderie and just having a chat with them. I remember the first day one of his pals came in and stayed an hour, and then the girl that he rang to say that he couldn't text, she came in. Now, he's known her since he was 3 years old, and she came in, and then she rang me, or Eoin texted me and says, "Are you around?" And I said, "I was just gone out for a walk." And I said, "Yeah, I'm still here." And then Trina rang me to say there's something happening to him again. So he was gone into a massive anxiety attack again. But we think that was just the overstimulation of having two pals in. And basically he doesn't remember any of this, but he must have been sick of the sight of my face, 24 hours a day, or Eileen being there the whole time. And he did. We were trying to explain to him that he was in the best place, and I remember him shouting at me that they can't do any more for me. They can't do any more. So just let me out, let me go home, or whatever it was. So as soon as the neurologist said, she said, "You can either go home tomorrow, or I would prefer if you waited until Monday so we can observe you over the weekend." He was not. That wasn't happening. He was out the door, But it was. I don't know how to describe. I would hate the feeling of powerlessness. It was just absolutely savage. That you can't do anything. And that there's no place where you can go where, as I said, try and find a path through this. There was nothing. It was just play it by ear, basically, day by day.
And that's what I wanted to ask you as well. Like, it's extremely rare, this type of disease anyway. But every patient is different. There is no path.
No.
Like, even if somebody happened to get it tomorrow, the path that they would or could be on will be totally different from Owen's.
Yeah. I mean, a lot of them are put in an induced coma because I'm not actually fully sure, but it's to allow the brain to rest as much as you can. So there was a guy in, I think he's in Sheffield, and he got in contact with me, and his girlfriend was 20 weeks pregnant when she got it. So she actually was in an induced coma right the way through pregnancy. I think she's only the third or fourth person in the world ever to have this thing while pregnant. she was in hospital from May and she got out last March. So, and again, the after effects that people don't, when you get out of hospital, oh, you must be better kind of thing. But she was struggling to acknowledge the baby as hers. I mean, it's just because they're home doesn't mean that the
danger hasn't gone away as such in the mindset that you know some of the figures, and I'm not saying that because you can't live your life that way either. But as the parent, as his parent, how is it for you and your wife now? Because it's unbelievable and it's amazing to hear that he's off Barcelona and you want it. But how is it for you? Because you're bound to be anxious and you're worried about him going off and doing that. How does it feel for you?
Eileen would worry more now, I think, about is he being sensible as regards just using hand gel or just some things like that. And I'm kind of going, he's 24 years of age. I mean, this is the time of your lifetime, essentially. So I'm would be encouraging him to live life to the full, and as best we can advise him to, you need to stay clear of very crowded places. That's I dare say is probably fallen on deaf ears, but
as you had alluded to earlier, the practicalities of the likes of a measles scare or COVID or like other things that we take for granted that our immune system can handle, and people aren't fully aware of the dangers of what you seem as a common cold, because you have your program and your level of immunity, they can fight it. If there has to be a level of worry that these things they're more serious for Eoin than they are for normal people.
He's had the flu twice since. It does take him longer to get over it, but apart from a couple of bad days the second time, and I don't mean like we say anybody would have the heavy flu. Apart from a couple of days, he's been fine. It does take him about twice as long to get over things.
Tell me then, Dermot, for other people now, and when we title this and people go, this might be videos they see, and what do you want them to take from this? Because I know when you reached out to things, you didn't get. People are in different positions, but if people now have a family member or a child or a loved one that's been diagnosed or going through the diagnosis process, what would you advise to them?
Ring me. Basically, that's the whole reason I'm here today is because I can tell them what we went through, and as he said, there's a lot of comfort in the fact that someone has been in that position. Ring me. I mean, my number is with the neurology team in Galway, so the next person that gets it.
Well, we'll obviously include links to profiles or anything that on the video, and people can reach out direct, but they can also message us, and we will get in contact with you. We never actually ever give out details, but we do take messages on behalf and ask the guest and put people in thing, and I think that's amazing. And speaking to you and hearing you and hearing about it, I think so many people could. You're an approachable guy. You're and you're not coming with that because you've been through. We haven't touched on some of the things you've been through, but like for a lot of people, it could struggle. It could make them very angry. It could make them very. But the fact you want to help people and you're encouraging no one to go out and live as that. And I know Irish mummies will worry about them, but obviously now Eoin's got more reason to worry, so she'll do that, and it's trying to balance that up. But I think it's amazing there that what you'll do, and for people that they could come and talk to, because you're bound to get very conflicting messages when it's sober. With people having, as Sean said, like they're not like their child or loved one might not have the same symptoms or might not have the same, but the effect for the person, for the family, will be similar. It'll be a similar experience.
Yeah, so at least there is someone that has been there, done that kind of thing. I'm just, something's after popping into my head there. Just going back to Eileen, I mean, she was an absolute rock. I remember outside the doors of ICU, and I'm putting my hand on hers, and I said, I don't have the strength for this, because I thought we were going to lose him. And I remember she just looked at me, she says, you have to. She says, you're the strong one. But it wasn't, she was, you know, she was just absolutely rock solid, you know. And I remember saying, this family suffered enough. I said, we don't deserve this, you know. She says, we'll deal with it. We'll get through it, you know. So, sorry, it just popped into my head there, sorry.
And no, I'm glad, because sometimes what happens is when me and Sean's talking to people, it as I said, it's a personal journey. It's not a personal journey, you're in it together, but how news like that affects her in her profession, she's in current role, how it affects you as a father. There's different ways people react, and sometimes it can be very, very hard in a relationship, because how you might be reacting might not be how your partner's reacting, and people think that we should react the same when we don't. No. And it's very, very hard and very, very taxing.
But I think if you sat down with Eileen and said to her, there's days that she's been the 10 and you've been the 90. I think in any relationship, there's always going to be them times that you're going to be sitting at 90 and she'll be 10, and vice versa. And it might not always be that way. It could be, you know, a 60-40.
Yeah.
But there's always going to be them times through that where she maybe was low. So, you know, she's probably right in what you're saying. Yeah. You were the strong one. You're the strong one, but maybe just not a particular day.
I don't think so. I think I just thought she was amazing, and Shona as well. Shona was able to tell us facts and figures, and she was. I can remember outside the HDU, and we were asked to leave at one stage, and Shona says, "What's going on?" She had just walked in, and I remember just looking at her and shaking my head because I couldn't get the words out, and she is going, this isn't unheard of, right? And she was able to reel off all these articles that she had read, and then she said the fact that when he was heavily sedated, that he did actually come back to it, 100% him, the humour and everything was back, and she says that means that the brain is still okay. So I too, absolutely wonderful women at my back, you know. And Dara, Dara still makes me laugh, you know. So yeah, I'm very lucky. We're lucky to be in where we are, you know. I was saying earlier, when I was in the hospital, I wrote a list of things as they were happening, so I could try, because we felt so powerless. I said, I'm going to do a blog, or I'm going to do an article, or I'm going to do something, just to try and help the next one. So I have the list here if I can read it. Getting old.
No, you're 100%. To be fair, Dermot, and I want to thank you, because it's very hard for people to recall chain of events, and things will come back to you in different, and also what will happen too when you leave here, you'll be like, I forgot that or thing.
So I there's no dates on this. I just added on a note time after time. So 3:39 a.m. small seizure, lasted 40 seconds, eyes closed and heart rate at 180. And then when you want a photo of your son, but you're afraid to be the last one that you'll ever take, and you don't want it to be of him, connected to monitors and tubes. 7:02 that morning, absent for 10 seconds. 10:02 the next morning, extremely agitated. He thought I'm withholding something for him, threatened to punch me, bit aggressive with the staff, got Xanax. This is not who my boy is. Stay strong, my beautiful boy. 3 a.m, tried to escape, took 4 nurses to keep him in the room. And then when you're planning your son's funeral, while he's lying on a bed in front of you, when you feel guilty about spending the night away from him, but you're secretly relieved because he can't bear the cries. When you don't want to leave your son because he's still alive, and you're afraid if you leave him, the next time you see him, he'll be dead. When you plan what you'll say at his eulogy and break down in tears with guilt for even thinking this. When your son is asleep and his mouth slightly open, you wonder, will this what his death mask is like? When you imagine yourself lying with your head on his favourite spot on the battered sofa and gently rub the blanket, hoping that you'll still be able to smell him. When you sit in the car park and you put off going into the hospital because you're afraid of what lies in wait. When every shake brings on the fear of seizures. When you're petrified the pain he has in his head could be serious. When you can't look him in the eye because you're afraid he's not there. And what madness will erupt if he wants to make contact with you. When you don't want to ask him how he's feeling because he'll just go and stare at you and follow you with his eyes. When you slowly realise that if he gets out of hospital it could be months. When you're afraid to be on your own with him in case it kicks off again and you're powerless to help. When you're shaking with fear, scared of what lies in the day ahead. When he stares at something and you're instantly afraid he'll go absent. When you're scared to start a conversation in case he gets agitated and you have no control over his actions. When even asking him to take tablets is scary because he wants to do this himself and he doesn't realise his shoulders are broken. When you're exhausted from being constantly in flight or fight mode. When brushing his teeth becomes a chance to explode. When you don't want him to wake up before Eileen gets back in case it's something that you're powerless to deal with. When you can't relax at his bedside because if he stares at something he could be catatonic. If he follows you with his eyes he could be lost. If he tremors it could be a seizure. If he asks questions it could lead to agitation. If he sleeps too much will he ever wake up? If he wakes too much is he getting enough sleep? When you're afraid to send a text message in case he can't understand it and gets frustrated. When he's taking 35 breaths per minute in his sleep. When it feels so wrong to have to spoon feed your own son. When you're leaning on the window of the 3rd floor of the hospital and think it wouldn't be bad if the window collapsed and you fell out. When your son had a seizure post-op and it feels you're back at square one. When you follow his bed out of recovery ward and it feels like you're following his coffin. When he's trying to belch and you're fucking terrified it's a seizure, but you can't wait for the day that this seems funny. When you find a quiet spot to weep because you don't have the energy to scream. When you're afraid of when he wakes up in case the gates of hell open. When he's trying so hard to keep his anxiety in check, he's shaking. When you're aware of his breathing because you're afraid it will quicken and it'll go into high anxiety mode. And the last one then is when you're petrified he can't take anymore. So that's...
As a father myself, that's hard till hear. But you know, Dermot, I don't think you give yourself enough credit for how strong you are. You're that, see, when people be that absolutely honest, and every parent in your positions had them thoughts, but nobody ever wants to say the things that is there. And I think other people will find more console in your honesty and the bravery to say it because they've thought it and they're annoyed and they think they're not their own. So I do urge anyone that's struggling in that to contact you because I think you'll help a lot of people. And I want to thank you for being so honest because we've had other pods where people like that, and being brutally honest, it takes a lot of guts because everyone always tries to give a rose's account of things.
Yeah.
But the honest truth is what relates to people most because every thought you listed there, I am sure there's somebody saying, yeah. And I've shared it. And maybe not with the same illness, maybe other illnesses or maybe other situations. But they weren't alone with them thoughts. There's other parents, and that you're now here, that you're talking about your son in Barcelona, that, you know, the amazing family, the close family that we're getting from that, the warmth and the closeness in your family is amazing. And I really hope, and I'm glad we've done this pod. And it's hard to do these pods. Sometimes they're tolling because it's raw emotion, and it's and that sounded like a catalogue of hell of emotions that you've went through and that someone's going through. So I want to thank you and there will be other people. And the thing about this is because it's rare, it mightn't be like another topic that relates to so many, but because it's rare, it only needs to be one other family. It only needs to be one other person that's in absolute despair. You know, that hits home and then it means, and then it's worth, you making that trip up here, exposing the pain, the emotion of that, and doing that. So I definitely, I think it'll help, and I want to thank you so much for it.
But I can see it in you as you're reading that, and while you were in that and you're writing them notes out, but now you're saying things are great. Have you actually went through them notes?
No, in the van before I came in.
Just before you came in?
Mm-hmm.
So the turning point come, and it was just like, there's the notes.
That's,
I'll keep that.
yeah, basically it, yeah.
There was one in there, and it was the picture, and it just, to me, you know, we can never comprehend. You can always try and emphasize, or you can have empathy with people, and you can try and put yourself, you can never put yourself, but there is people in them shoes. So I think it fair play to you.
No, it's as I said, that the whole reason I wanted to do this was just because there will be another family that, and it's probably more common than, it's misdiagnosed a lot of the time, so what I would say is, when the next person is diagnosed with it, just get in contact. It doesn't matter where you are.
Also, if you think that your son, daughter, wife, husband, whoever it is, if you think that this here is fitting to that, and you're not receiving that diagnosis, one thing we have found, don't be afraid to reach out to somebody else and maybe go and look about a second.
Absolutely.
Because if it's as rare as this, and you didn't have such a well-tuned, what do you call them, that spotted it, you may have, we may not have been here and having this conversation, if it wasn't treated in the way it needed to be.
Dr. Elman was actually in contact with the doctor in Barcelona, him being the father of the disease, for want of a better word. She just, a special word to her, she was just absolutely amazing. I would never play poker against that woman for, just...
It's funny, these amazingly skilled doctors, their personality's so blunt, and they're brick through a window. They don't have time for pleasantries. They don't have time for...
She actually rang radiology. She asked radiology to x-ray the first shoulder because he said it was hurting him. And she says the other one is after being operated on. And she asked whoever was beside her to make sure they x-ray both shoulders. And of course, only one came back. And she picked up the phone, and she's given them an earful. And she said to one of the nursing assistants, I could hear her come down the corridor, and she stopped the nursing assistant. And she says, can you see my patient from there? And nursing assistant says, yes. And she says, can you really? Get out of the chair. So she sat in the chair and says, if I can't see her, you can't. Please position this chair correctly. And then the door opened and she walked in. And I'm going, oh, do you know, I mean, we've this woman in our corner, absolutely amazing. And I've never heard of a consultant picking up the phone to ring a laboratory to try and expedite tests. Never heard of that before. So she was absolutely the perfect person to have in our corner at the time. She just took control over everything, which was
amazing.
It wasn't easy to hear at times, but it was.
We've had some people here that they needed the truth, and they needed it the way it was said to them because they were in denial or they are. And we've had people here that maybe didn't appreciate that it's so hard for them. Till how do you and as I says, they're busy and they're fixated. People like that become super at the top of their tree. They become fixated on their patient and what they're doing, and at that moment in time, you're feeling and time for pleasantries and it's not their forefront. Yeah,
she was actually on my brother's, my eldest brother. He had a team neurologist looking at him because he's got his muscles in his shoulders in particular are weakening. So they thought it was a neurological thing, and she was actually part of the team that was checking on him a couple of years ago. And Jim doesn't take prisoners at all. So if he thinks that someone is not stepping up to the mark, he'd say it straight out. And he said something anyway to the team of 4 neurologists, and she threw it straight back in his face. I don't know what it was. And he says, from then on, he says, I knew she's the perfect one for you, you know.
Yeah.
Well, look, thank you very much, Dermot.
Not at all.
This is what me and Sean wanted to do in these. The one thing that we always see and know, and I know from this, when people come here, some people come here to help others, which I know you have, and we see it straight away because it's easy. People, there's two reasons to come here. They come to help people, or they come for their own smoke. And I always think, we know straight away, and we know that you wouldn't. This is not what you want to do. No. You're not wanting to be here, but you'll get the feedback. We'll get the feedback, and for every one message we get, there's 100 other people that just have a message but have things. So from them, I want to thank you too.
Yeah, if I can just say thanks to Eoin in particular and the kids, my own brothers, and then Eoin's sisters, but in particular Margie, who came down and just looked after things while we were in the hospital. And there's a mate of mine in Tenerife, Kev, who never rang me once over the whole experience, but every single morning at 9 o'clock there was a text message, and I didn't want to talk to anyone anyway. The message was the perfect medium for me, and every morning without fail, 9 o'clock I get a message from him saying what happened, and it wasn't just our things, it's what happened, and he'd list off the things that happened previously and any improvement from this, that, and the other, and it was just it's just bringing support from everybody. Yeah.
Well, look, thank you very much for coming on the show,
No problem.
and we wish Eoin all the best as well.
Cheers. I'll keep you updated.
Thank you very much.
Cheers.
Thank you.